for coming. My name's Dee Halligan, and I run a creative studio called Forth. We're concerned with learning and engagement, and we talk about learning engagement in order to connect with the ideas and the skills needed in a changing world. So we have a broad remit where we've worked across from universities, from schools, and we often work in non-formal environments outside of school walls, outside of classrooms. And the project that we're talking about today firsthand is our effort to get really, really far away from a classroom, because we're looking at activating industrial environments for learning. And the reason we're doing this, I'll go into in a little bit of detail. The session today is about 45 minutes. We're very, very happy to be joined by Sarahjane Widdowson, who I can credit with being one of the initial, when we were casting about. This is a European funded project which started with a research period, which brought me to the Waste and Resource Management Expo in Birmingham, NEC, where I caught a green skills presentation by the Chartered Institute of Waste Management. And on that day, I heard Sarahjane's take on future skills, and in particular, a very, I guess, a vision of need which felt very distant from the realities of the existing institutions and the way that we train people in terms of skills, or the way that we bring people in terms of ideas into the world that we need to build together. So Sarahjane is going to share with us today some of her work as an independent consultant, her work with the Chartered Institute of Waste Management, and some of her work also with an NGO overseas. So I'm very happy about that. And I'm going to take you through the work that we've been doing as part of Firsthand, which is a program that we've developed in the last 18 months. We have developed Firsthand because of a reading of the ideas and the skills needed in the world today, and a conviction that the future we need to build will only be brought into being together, that it's a collective action, that it's beyond the ability of individuals and individual organizations in particular, because we are looking at industry, that individual organizations cannot bring forth the change that we need to see. So this quote, "This cannot be done in isolation," is actually a quote from the head of sustainability at IKEA. And this idea that openness and collaboration are no longer optional in the world that we need to, in a sustainable world, is central to the work that we're doing at Firsthand. And this isn't an argument based in ideology. It's not an argument based in it's an argument which is very often sent to the periphery. But actually what I'd like to propose to you today is that this is central to all business operating ideas, no matter what your attitude. We're working in a world of complexity. So whatever your attitude, whatever your sector, these are ideas you need to bring into the heart of the way that you're working. So we're going to work differently in the future. I think that's what we're saying. And the first image on the screen, I can see Sarahjane smiling. I began the week last week at Wandsworth Riverside Waste Authority, and it was actually a revelation of all the places that I've been to so far on this journey that we've been on over the last 18 months, looking at the places which are, I guess, have potential to be leveraged for learning. So have the potential, places which have the people and the skills and evidence which can bring people into this world and give them a foothold in the kinds of knowledge and skills that they need, and can catalyze conversations between sectors, catalyze exchange between professionals, sustainability professionals and wider. And of all the places I've seen, I think this is the one that possibly, I don't know, it excited me and also daunted me. It's a local authority in its own right, serving 4 boroughs in London. It sits on the river. It's almost invisible. I've passed by it a number of times and not known what happens. And what you're seeing here in the picture, I think, gives you, on the right-hand side of this image, that is the warehouse which effectively houses the recycling facility, this cartoon-style machine, a conveyor belt, which takes truckloads of recyclable waste in one side, and from the other side comes out those harvested materials, whether that's cardboard or plastics, etc. And in this enormous conveyor belt, which goes multiple stories, you have these different systems, many of them technology-based, some of them human-based, which extracts these reusable or recyclable waste. And on the other side, the waste which is not usable goes out onto the river. And I think the reason, and goes for burning further downstream. And I think this line down the middle, the idea of the river on one side and the technology and deep expertise on the other, and this complex world which has grown, it was started in 2011, kind of exemplifies the pace of change. This is 15 years ago the facility started. A huge increase in the penetration of recycling behaviors in the general population, a huge increase in the technology available to process this waste, and then this interface, these kinds of the evidence of skills, both in terms of technology and processing systems and processes, and also this deep and, I guess, enduring expertise which relates to the river. So when we talked about the river and how this whole system works, the human interfaces, the equipment and technological interfaces, and then the nature interface which exists to one side of it, because the tides rule how often you can take the waste out on one side. And the skills agenda around the tides is equally as important as the skills agenda around the technology and innovation. So the idea that weather events are starting to influence the tides changes the way that you bring the waste out on one side. And the qualifications, you know, you can drill down as far as the apprenticeships on the river. It's a grandfather industry. That's the phrase I heard being used there, because it carries down through generations. When you qualify through apprenticeship, your knowledge of the river is confined only to the Thames. It takes 5 years as an apprenticeship. And I think there's something about this image that sums up this idea of longevity, how long it takes someone to qualify and acquire the knowledge, the change, because weather events and other types of complexity, demographics, behaviors in urban contexts influence how this facility develops. Regulation influences how this facility develops. And I think this image exemplifies how the theoretical ideas of systemic change meet a very solid reality where time is another factor. So this idea of qualification, this idea of bringing knowledge and skills into a formula which can be shared and exchanged and built. There's something about this image that conveys that huge complexity. And I guess our reason for launching something like Firsthand is we believe that as part of this change, we need to bring people into interface, into connection with this reality in a catalyzing way, in a way which builds conversation, and also in a very structured way, not in a visit which says, wow, this is really inspiring. Wow, this is a vision of the future I'd like to see. One which actually analyzes and makes actionable what you're seeing. And that's what we're trying to do in the events that we're running currently. So that's going to be in our autumn program, we hope. So at some point, I'm hoping it'll be available for you guys to book in. In the meantime, I'll just spin you through quickly what we've been up to before I pass over to Sarahjane. So we've done a series of events this springtime. These are small scale events, they're small scale facilities. We actually called the spring edition, as we called it prototyping alternatives. And we looked at small projects which give us some kind of indication of a future we might want to build, while demonstrating some of the skills and practices which are important for us to master. So the Fixing Factory is a tiny shop front, and I think there's a tendency to see it as a project, as a project in its own right, which represents one possible future, and it does that, but it also demonstrates all kinds of work in terms of collaborations, large-scale collaborations between borough councils, systemic working, because it's not a standalone point, it's an idea of a node on a connected system which goes deep into waste systems like the one that we've just seen, and also governance and regulation systems, as well as its penetration into repair skills in local populations. It's really working in a very refined way. The theory of change that it represents, so it represents, you know, a kind of material node, but it represents also a kind of a test or a trial and experiment in this theory of change that the Restart Project and Possible, the two kind of leads on manifesting this project. It represents just one experiment in many as they contemplate their desired futures and what that might look like. So the three little tags at the top, creativity, collaboration, and complexity, represent our curriculum. So when we're not talking about these as ideas, we're talking about these as skilled practices. And we've developed a way, I guess, for each of these visits, and these are just walking tours. We've also experimented with formats which are half day and full day, and we're looking to the future when maybe these itineraries can be linked together so you can work through a full program of learning across multiple sites and also in hybrid ways. But we will lead for each of these walking tours. You lead with one of these. On Fixing Factory, we did an experiment in imagination at the end, a workshop in imagination, and that started to, I guess, bring to light kind of what something like the Fixing Factory can represent as an imaginative exercise. The second event that we ran was in the long-term partners, the Felix Project. And the Felix Project, I think this is the fourth or fifth time that we've visited their Poplar depot, bringing all kinds of people around a facility which is industrial in scale, which deals with tonnages of food waste in a very dynamic and agile way, to see them working with an unexpected input at scale through refrigeration, through spoilage, their understanding and the layers of complexity they're dealing with is just, it runs through the business, through the organization, from the effectively the way that trucks come in and the food is processed in a very practical way through the site, but also how they see themselves as an organization, how they develop and grow. And I think when we said here, the thriving organization that's working with intent to remove its reason for being, you know, their dual mission of addressing food poverty and food waste is completely in tension. They recognize that and they're working into that in really interesting ways. What you see in the depot is it just comes to life as you see the industrial scale of the warehousing facilities and how food comes through that with all its different kind of sell-by dates and spoilage and things like brand tension. So, you know, their suppliers don't necessarily want to be seen as overproducers, for example. They're working into a busted supply chain. You know, with global, there was a moment in this particular tour where I've more lines than you've ever seen. And when you track back as to where those lines are coming from, what the system that produced those was, the effort that went into growing those lines and how they ended up in the place that we saw them, and then where that future destination would be. It just really vividly brings to life the complexity of the systems that we're trying to change. The third stop off was literally just last Friday, was Pembroke House. And I think in the three tours that we did this springtime, we were trying to kind of represent all ways that change comes through a system, you know, comes through a broken supply chain where actually there's incentives to repair it, but you've also got grassroots community groups who are able to, I mean, Pembroke House and Walworth Neighbourhood Food Model in particular, which is one of their programs, really came to our attention because of the ways that they were drawing on really refined processes and practices which were drawn from industry, from innovation, as well as other kind of participatory practices in community and grassroots activism. And they were pooling these together, learning together, setting up structures and infrastructure, running action learning sets between the 18, I think, different organizations which were involved in the neighborhood food model. And one thing which I thought was really notable was that the lenses they were bringing to their neighborhood's relationship with food went from health through to the local economy, how local businesses relate to it. So what started as a food poverty project during COVID, so effectively setting up an informal food bank and a community fridge in a local community centre, rapidly started to expand to understand the dynamics of food in all its manifestations in that local area. And literally, we've been collaborating with them since 2023, and we've seen these systems that they're put into being, the kind of capacity building that they're doing on the ground, really start, I was about to say bear fruit, and that seems really, really too tightly connected to what they're doing there. But what they have done is they have gone from this alliance, from a community mapping exercise, from brokering local networks and ensuring, I guess, that those alliances are really working to the advantage of local people. They've now got funding in place for a local food hub. They're in relationship with a local developer and really with the objective of drawing in local businesses so that it doesn't continue to be, I don't know what the word you'd use is, but peripheralized, perhaps, sent to the periphery because it looks like a community project. And I think Southwark also have been very supportive as a borough council in understanding. And you've got organizations like Sustain with their food places and food places toolkits. There's a lot of work in this area. And I think what we're seeing in Walworth's neighbourhood food model is that community capacity being built because those kind of infrastructures and that knowledge has been built through time. None of these initiatives happen off their own back. There's no need to reinvent the wheel. They're able to draw on all this kind of expert knowledge. And increasingly, you're getting, because they are demonstrating alternative ways to work, you're getting interest, the exchange that they are creating between community groups, small business, and corporate businesses is to mutual benefit. There's no fear, there's no idea that it sits outside of those systems. It sits as part of those systems and needs to be part of those conversations. And to tap into that, that group that you see in the bottom right-hand corner there in the most ridiculous sunshine on Friday in Walworth Garden, was made up of people from industry, people from local government, educators, and people from community groups, and they're sitting in equal exchange, and we're trying to find that shared language which allows them to talk about their processes in a way which is understandable to people who are perhaps describing the same things in a business context, but with very, very different language. So I think that's where we're finding our value, I guess, in recognizing these kinds of activities and drawing out those parallels so that organizations start to see those parallels and start to feel galvanized by those other efforts and building capacity, I guess, and infrastructures, new kinds of business infrastructures which go beyond the existing infrastructures. Because whatever change is happening, it's happening within the assets and resources that we have already. So if we're not recognizing that and trying to move those organizations and structures along, we're living in a dream world effectively. So in previous briefings, we've gone into other kinds of organizations who are working in equally open and collaborative ways to different ends. And I think getting to know where those benefits lie is really, really the way that you can draw other kinds of people who perhaps are not motivated, because they are working with a community ethos or because they're not working necessarily with a sustainability ethos, but they might be able to solve other business problems through these mechanisms. And we're working very closely with UCL's Climate Action Unit. And the thing that we've picked up of their many kind of, behavioral insights and insights from neuroscience, actions drive beliefs is one that we're clinging very strongly to. We don't mind who we're working with, because really, if we can find those interfaces where there's shared benefit, we can have those conversations, and those actions start to drive those beliefs and bring us all into collective action together, even when those alliances are imperfect. So these are some examples, Tony's Chocolonely being one of our faves, obviously, because they're working with now an alliance of 100 across the cocoa supply chain in a really, really interesting format. We've got other people solving skills gaps in collaborative or collective ways. There's any number of innovative learning formats, and Zaira Hospitality came to our attention because of their pop-up skills schools, where they bring together temporarily hotel chains, local hotel chains, to create these kind of 6-week, very rapid programs which offer local opportunity and widen access to those kinds of skill sets. So lots of examples out there. Our efforts are to bring those to the fore, showcase them, visit them when we can, but really to kind of identify what are those shared practices, what are those skills, how can we replicate and scale these efforts? So it's not all about, wow, they're inspiring. It's about, how do they do it? How do we get access to those practices? How do we share those practices? And how do we create those networks, which means we learn from each other? And if we're not doing it on the side of sustainability, I can guarantee you corporate businesses are doing this. So this is a quote from Boston Consulting Group. And I think you can draw parallels, you know, between the work that we're drawing attention to and things like Tesla's open patent system, where they get their supply chain working cooperatively on the patents. They see a business incentive to do that in very kind of cold, harsh kind of, you know, business light, rather than a sustainability or ethical light. You're seeing alliances across fashion brands. You're seeing alliances, you know, they, you know, I won't, what's the word, endorse necessarily, you know, some of the language which are used around them, but that idea that business ecosystems are the only vehicles for tackling complex challenges and systemic change, that's something which is recognized by the biggest of businesses. It's also something which is governed by law. So, you know, we have to be very careful when you're talking about consumer interests or public interests, because, you know, whatever you think about consortia, they are next door to cartels and next door to monopolies. So there's a whole world, you know, once you start to dig into this, there's a whole world of business law which maybe prohibit people from working collectively. And knowing about that and navigating that successfully is something that we need to do. So we've got this kind of, we're not talking about that collaboration space owning all of business. We're talking about knowing where it's appropriate, knowing where it's beneficial to all, being very specific about what the formats are and what innovations are there, and being very careful about whose advantage this is working toward and what benefit we can get out of this. And that's, you know, these are familiar to anyone who follows any of our communications. You know, this was one of the original pieces that, you know, kind of penny drop moments for us. We had kind of pages and pages of research, and then we saw this and we were like, yes, that sums up a lot of what we're after. This representation of the SDGs does something similar. The line that you see in the middle with goal 17 at the top, goal 17 is partnership for the goals. And as I've seen it referred to as the goal without which all of the other goals are impossible. If you are not able to partner effectively, if you are not collaborating effectively, all the rest of it is lost. And our proposal, or, you know, our central proposition is that that is a skilled exercise. So if we're not bringing that through a skills lens and treating it as a skills challenge, then we're not really going to get there. So that's the end of my spiel. We're talking about it being openness and collaboration being no longer optional, and firsthand being our attempt, I guess, to make a contribution, because I think there's going to be lots of different ways that we're going to bring this forward. And one of the ways that we can do that is also by learning from others. So I'm just going to ask Sarahjane to speak and share with us over the next kind of 10 minutes or so. And then we'll have a few minutes just to flash in front of you what we're doing next, and maybe even get some voices from any of you who'd like to contribute. So Sarahjane, would you like to share?
That would be fantastic, if that's okay. Let me...
You could start.
This is where you learn about my technology skills, isn't it? Let me just stick that one and share. And then if I share screens.
Perfect, you're up.
Now, can you see me still?
Yeah.
Ah, fantastic. Dee, thank you so much for the invitation. And also, I'm so pleased that you enjoyed the visit to Western Riverside last week. It's always really interesting to see how other people view sites that you've been working at, and through what lens they sort of view the different practices that are going on. So thank you. And I'm sure they would love to have you on a visit in the autumn as well. That would be great. So I'm going to spend the next sort of 10 minutes talking about skills and open learning in resources and waste management. I'm a rubbish professional. I spent most of my career working in waste resources and the circular economy. It's a sector that everybody's familiar with. Everybody has a waste and recycling collection, hopefully a food waste collection at home. We all use those collections at home, and hopefully at work as well, but few people understand just how complex the system is. Now, the diagram that's on the screen at the moment, it's been going around for a few years, but I still think it's one of the best, but also one of the most complex.
Sorry, Jane, we're just seeing, well, I don't know if it's for everyone else, but I'm just seeing your opening slide, not in presentation.
Is it not? Oh, is it not moving on? Can you see the others? No,
it's just down the side, so we're not seeing you in presentation mode.
Let me end slideshow. Oh, that's frustrating. I told you my technology skills were.
Shall I pop it up on my screen?
Yeah, actually, would that be okay? And I can just talk to the slides if that's all right.
Sure. Just let me know when you want to.
That would be better. So if we can get on the messy, complex diagram again, that would be great. So yeah, it is a really complex system. The complexities are in the types of materials, the waste that we produce, the technologies we use, the regulations we need to abide by. They are all constantly changing, and also our behaviours and how we react to this system and how we use the system. So we need to take a systems approach really to our operations. But this can be really difficult for the waste sector because actually we're often dealing with things that are end of pipe, so to speak. So it's difficult for us to influence the waste that we receive. So planning for the future is absolutely essential. If you could pop to the next slide. So as a rubbish professional or a chartered waste and resources manager, I'm a member of the Chartered Institution of Waste Management, which is one of the trade bodies that different sectors have. Our sector is incredibly diverse, so it has both real technical specialists, but also social, behavioural change specialists, legislative specialists as well. And it represents around 5,000 individuals and lots of different organisations. Now, some of the work that I've done with the CIWM in the past, and when Dee saw me actually at one of our big bin conferences, as we like to call them, was about skills for the future. So CIWM wanted to think about actually how the sector is going to evolve in the future, and importantly, what the future skills and jobs demands would be. So sector as it stands, there's probably around 140,000 core staff. Of that, about 18% held no qualifications in about 2015, which is when the last data is from. The entire workforce, 16% were female, and that's particularly at the frontline services. So the collection crew, the people that come around and collect your waste and recycling. Quite a low ethnic diversity rate, so around 7%, so really not diverse. Quite an ageing sector as well, so 12% of the workforce are over 60 years of age, and we're really struggling to kind of attract younger people to the sector as well. So actually the industry as a whole face lots of challenges. If you can go on to the next slide, please. So CIWM commissioned two reports that I helped to develop with other partners. One focused on skills, which is the skills for the future. So it looked at actually what the what challenges the sector is facing in the future, and actually what skills we need to rise up to meet those challenges and when. And then following on from that, there was research around sector transitions that looked at what skills, what jobs we would need, when, and how that translated to actually additional roles that the sector required. And we calculated that across the piece, around 240,000 additional roles were needed in the sector by 2040. And these are new roles as well, not individual sort of skill transitions within the sector. So as part of this overall research, CIWM looked at also at which occupations will be most important, what the employer demand was, and also whether there will be any regional nuances actually around that. You often find that the waste sector has, well, you find that the waste sector has different sort of regional hubs of excellence. So things connected with organics, so food waste composting, there's a lot of demand for that in East Anglia, for example, because actually there's a lot of demand for the outputs of those sectors, the fertilizer, for example. If we could pop onto the next slide, if that's okay. We mapped the transitions to 2040. And this slide really just looks at what types of roles are associated with those time points. Some of it early on is to do with actually regulatory change. So rather excitingly, the waste sector is going through huge regulatory change at the moment. Lots of different new regulations coming in, from simpler recycling, so implementing the need to recycle in workplaces across England, through to major packaging reforms called the extended producer responsibility, which should help to drive packaging to be more recyclable and producers to be more responsible for what they put on the market. So we looked through the report at actually what type of roles would be needed when, and we found that regulatory change, but also other external influences like the rise in AI, longer term views around increasing automation, but also different metrics like carbon were really influencing the types of roles that would be required. So once that report was published, CIWM put together a Skills for the Future working group that drew expertise from across the sector to really help to support CIWM to shape their offering for the future. If you could go to the next slide, please. And they developed a skills matrix. And this skills matrix sets out the essential knowledge, capabilities, and practical skills required to achieve success in a variety of roles, and importantly, at different career stages. So whether it's individuals taking their first step into the sector, those progressing in the sector, or also those transitioning into the sector as well, or re-entering the workforce. And the framework provides a clear roadmap, and you can actually go on to CIWM website. There's a kind of an interactive matrix that you can complete, and it suggests what sort of competencies you would need for different roles, what training you should look to complement those roles. CIWM has provided this, but actually a lot of other professional bodies provide something similar. So IEMA is also a good one to reference. On the back of this as well, and as part of one of the presidential reports, CIWM developed some fantastic video case studies looking at different careers, different elements of the sector, and outlining what sort of skills people need to work in those places. I haven't put the link actually in this presentation, but I can drop it into the chat afterwards because it's well worth dipping into those to take a look. So supporting these initiatives were all being driven by the chartered body itself. The chartered body has the support of an incredible amount of volunteers across the UK that work in regional groupings. And I have just recently stepped down from being the chair for the London and Southern Counties Centre. And these regional groups of volunteers, we help to put on site visits, open meetings, anything to really support our members locally. If we can go to the next slide. Thank you. These are just fantastic learning opportunities. Being a chartered professional, you have to demonstrate your competencies, but also demonstrate continued learning. And actually attendance at these types of site visits, but also open meetings and webinars help to do that. As a local centre, we also help to mentor, particularly sort of those that are new to the sector. CIWM has set up early careers ambassadors as well that help to connect young professionals within the organisation. In CIWM as well, we also have technical communities and strategic expert groups as well that help to disseminate information to wider members about their specialist area. So there's a real network of different communities across the organisation. If we can go to the next slide, please. One of the other hats I wear, which is wonderfully linked with CIWM, I've been a trustee of an international waste development organisation called WasteAid for a long time now, about 10 years, and CIWM has incredibly kindly funded some projects that we're delivering in the Gambia. And I wanted just to tell you a little bit about this because it's almost replicating some of the models I think that you're looking at, particularly the Pembroke House one, I think. So we help to develop with the local community a circular economy network. What we've done is actually worked with the community to establish what's required. We've done gap analysis, baseline reviews. We've brought together and, well, we've developed and handed over a network which has, you know, almost 300 individuals from a really wide range of professions, from the local councils to local community members, to come together and share ideas. If we could go to the next slide. As part of our funding, we've helped to provide training as well to people that are developing small businesses. So we've done competitions like waste to use challenges, a bit like a Dragon's Den style approach, where individuals come up with business ideas. We help to support them with training in standard business skills generally to create a sustainable business plan. But we've also used CIWM and the technical expertise from that group to feed into that. And through CIWM as well, we've helped to make great links with the local council. We've had technical specialists come over from the UK to provide advice on things like vehicles, engineering, maintenance and repairs, as well as other treatment technologies. So I think it's a fantastic extension of what we do as a chartered body in the UK to really support projects and initiatives elsewhere. And what's, I suppose my final point here is what's been really important is that sort of the knowledge sharing, the ability to go and look at sites, to share that information, and to get together. So that was a rapid fire sort of introduction to the chartered institution, and also to, if we go to the last slide, just to WasteAid. Happy to answer any other questions on the back of this. I know I've not left you a lot of time there.
Well, thanks a million, Sarahjane. And I mean, from my point of view, you know, the vision that you painted in that skills workshop at the Waste and Resource Management Centre, I think what you had was a fully fleshed out vision of what the future looks like when when, and it was when, not if, when waste is a primary resource.
Mhm.
And I think we understood at that moment that kind of inevitability,
Yeah.
the things we know and the things that will change. There's lots of uncertainty, but there are also things that we know, and we need to build both for what we know, what we don't know, and the scale of that challenge, to have it quantified. I think those are the two things that we struck us. And we haven't really seen in many other sectors, though all sectors will mirror the kinds of analyses that you are doing, the kinds of skills gaps and skills shortages that you're talking about, the kinds of retraining. I think that's the challenge that we need all hands on deck for. And so our offering as firsthand is to try and formalize and share some of those techniques and some of those, and to use them, because it's not only in sector, it's cross-sector conversations that are imperative in order to deliver change. So we are talking about moving from the theories of change through to where I started, that original picture of Wandsworth Riverside Waste Authority, because reality is unyielding and it's heavily invested. There are sunk costs, there's equipment and environments which people have invested into, and persuading people to change. And it's always people you're changing because the environments, the equipment are mute. But the emotions around that, and I think just in the last minutes, I'll just wave in front of you, the kinds of barriers and resistance that we're finding that we need to overcome. So that convention and imagination, the incentives through governance and regulation, that huge uncertainty and risk, and lack of partners, because the idea that you will go it alone might be heroic, but you can't move a sector by yourself. So there's a whole new business infrastructure which requires all of those imaginations as well. But right at the bottom, and our focus is the know-how that you need to really be able to identify those skills you might have dismissed as soft skills, being imagination and creativity, being collaboration, which allows you to navigate complexity, which is a central green competency. So we're just in the last minutes. We're challenging you to think about what's stopping you. We're sharing some of the feedback that we've had, because I would say the emotional side of this has been something which has been resonated with us in our conversations with people from the beginning, that is often the things which make, on an individual level and on an organization, organizations can be anxious. So, sectors can be anxious and can be paralyzed by not knowing what the right step is, and, not knowing that the next step in a complex system is the next good thing that you can do, is the next good step in a system. It's not necessarily knowing what that huge change looks like. So, anyone who knows me for long enough knows that the Verkana two loops model of needing to ally in order to change a system is really the fundamental to all of this. And the tools that we're looking at is drawing attention to that green transformation in practice through learning events, through tours, through creating these real life opportunities in partnership with other people who are doing the same work, those other networks that are bringing people together, and then bringing those kind of insights and intelligence, those tools and practices into the mainstream. The last slide that I have is just what we're planning for the autumn edition, because we're super excited. And obviously, this is under a Horizon Europe funding. It's the last batch of us doing big things, testing out what the potential is. So we're going wild in the autumn time, looking at material systems and food systems. We're working with brilliant people. So New Covent Garden Market and Mission Kitchen, I'm particularly looking forward to. Orkney International Science Festival is just going to be stellar. They're doing a mini climate COP. We're working with the Fab Lab in Barcelona to look at urban scale transformation systems and the infrastructures they have there. And I can tell you already, the things that we're finding, the tools and the infrastructure that we're finding look the same in Walworth Road as they look after 20 years of community capacity building in Orkney, as they do in Barcelona. They are very, very similar, repeat structures, repeat skills, and we're drawing those through. And our vision for next year is not us running ourselves ragged, traveling and doing this. We want other organizations, we want industry, we want local government to be opening up local itineraries using this kind of curriculum and encouraging green competencies. So it's 32. I'm going to stop there. We'll circulate this program. I'm really sorry we didn't get a chance. I think we talked a lot and didn't invite questions, so I apologize for that. Sometimes we get a bit carried away with the lunchtime briefings, and it's bad practice, I would say, from my point of view. But I'm really pleased to see some familiar faces here and a few people I don't know. And please be in touch. We're very open, really. My email is there, the link to the website is there, and we'd love to see you on one of the live events. We're just a couple of minutes over, and I'll leave you there. Please be in touch. Bye-bye.